This is Matt Sukley with me as well, and today we're going to be discussing the QSCP, or the Quick Spec Coordination Panel, and also our compact circuit protector that uses the cube fuses. So the Quick Spec Coordination Panel board is part of our gear package. It is a fusible panel board. We have it available with us from 6 amps to 400 amp. We also have up to 1200 amp available in a slightly larger format. But in this format, we have, it's 20 inches wide. It's a much smaller footprint than you'll see on some of our competition that have fusible panel boards. It is available in 50, 100, and 200K SCCR or interrupting rating. Because the fuse that we use inside the panel is the cube fuse, it also has a certain amount of finger safe. So it's an IP20 finger safe fuse, and that helps the switch become IP20 finger safe, so the whole panel is IP20 finger safe. The main advantage that the fusible panel gives you over, say, a circuit breaker panel board is that it is easier to selectively coordinate based on fuse ratios. So we go over that all the time. If you use the 2-to-1 fuse ratio that selectively coordinates with low peak fuses, it's much easier. So you can go from a KRPC to an LPJ or a TCF, which is a cube fuse, or an LPCC, and just use that 2-to-1 ratio. As long as that upstream fuse is 2 times larger or more in amp rating, you'll have a selectively coordinated system. So that's its main advantage when we deal with this panel board being easier to coordinate. The way that it ships out is usually when we get a PO and it gets released, we ship the cans in 4 to 5 days or a week, and then the back in the interior comes usually 4 to 6 weeks later. We do have expedite options. We're working on building these panels in West Hampton, New Jersey as well. We have a satellite facility, and we'll do some manufacturing there. So if it's a real expedite option, or if it's a quick ship necessity, we can do those in 10 days. But of course, we are going to charge you a little bit more, and there is an expedite fee for that as well. But standard lead time is 4 to 6 weeks for the interiors and 4 to 5 days for the cans. All right, so the cube fuse is 600 volt. If you notice on some of the features of this, it's 600 volt AC, 125 volt DC. We also have time delay fuses, not just and fast acting fuses. So the panel board can be used for all different applications besides just your normal loads. It can also be used for backup or UPS systems and some of the power modules that they use for that. So it's fusible, non-fused. In the main section, you can see the sample on your presentation has a fusible main on it. The sample that we have with us today does not, so it's either fused, non-fused, or just main lug only. Like I said, it is available with 50K, 100, and 200K SCCRs. One of the main things for it is the fusible option is only available at 100. The fusible main option has the 100K. The other way at 50 and 200K is for the main lug only. So there are also feed-through sublugs and feed-through lug options for connecting to another panel or whatever, or if you need more than 42 circuits in a panel. It is a 200 amp fused load side disconnect option as well. We also have bonded and unbonded neutrals, or isolated and non-isolated grounds. We also have Type 2 surge protection available, so it is available with TVSS or surge protective device on it. And that's some of the other options are NEMA 1, NEMA 3R. These are all easily configured, and we can quote them relatively quickly. Some of the other options that we have are not as easily quoted. But, like door-and-door option is one of the ones that we use all the time. Obviously, we need to know whether it's top-fed or bottom-fed. The height of the QSCP will depend on, obviously, how many circuits it has, and also if there's TVSS and what kind of main disconnect is being used. They're all 5 3/4 inches deep and all 20 inches wide. Obviously, when we get to some of the 1200 amp rated panel boards, we're going to be looking at a much wider and also deeper footprint. So we have these available in 18, 30, and 42 branch circuit available. Obviously, we have spaces available, and they all use the cube fuse. And the cube fuse has the ability to go from, I believe it's 1 amp.
1 amp.
To 100 amps. And we also have the ability to indicate on the fuse itself as well as on the switch. So we have removable branch knockouts, and if you notice on the bottom of the screen, of the panel on the screen, and also the spare fuse compartment right here. So all of the QSCP panel boards that we ship out include spare fuses. So it's part of the package when we quote these things, that we do quote it with spare fuses, and we make the decision on which ones to send out with the fuses. And like I said before, cans usually ship in 4 to 5 days, much quicker than the interiors. Not everything else, right? Yeah. Some of the selling points, obviously, the much smaller footprint. If you look at our competition, it is sometimes 28 to 30 inches wide. So if you look at the 20-inch footprint, it's more like a normal panel board. And we used to have a 28-inch wide panel board with a switch and a fuse holder. And when we came to the CCP, it made it a much more compact design, and it saves a ton on weight as well. The older designs and some of the designs that some of our competition uses is a lot wider and also much heavier. So by using the fuse system, we are more easily selectively coordinated. So it's a big, and it's a lot easier to specify the fuses in situations where you're going to have selective coordination required. So with safety, obviously, since it's finger safe, it's going to protect exposure to live parts. Also, it's going to reduce your arc flash incidents or any possibility of having an arc with it being IP20 finger safe. So if the quick quote online configure makes specifying easier and ordering easy as well. We do have a website available to anyone who wants access to it. All you have to do is contact your Bussman sales representative, either myself, Matt, Anthony Wilson in New York, or I think
Barry Nestor. Barry Nestor's in New York,
yeah.
And Mike Akins is State College in those areas.
Yeah, I think those, just contact one of them, and we'll be able to give you access to the quick quote coordinator, right?
Yeah.
So you can design your panel. If you have like the panel schedules from the drawings for the project that you're working on, you can do it yourself, or obviously you can always contact us. We'll be happy to quote it for you. We do have a quick ship program, like I said before. The expedited service does come at a slight fee.
Right.
And obviously, like I said before, we use cube fuses in this whole fusible package. One of the things that the CCP does do is that it's in the on position, like you can see, I don't know if you can see this one really well, but if it's on, you cannot pull the fuse out. Well, this one's a little older. And if it's, you have to turn these off to pull the fuse out.
Once you turn it off, you can pull the fuse out. It's hard to see, but if you look on the front, when you do see it, they are finger touch safe, just as John said. So you can't get your fingers in there. So if you do have to replace a fuse, you don't have to worry about somebody sticking their fingers in there and getting electrocuted.
Yep. So the other thing is the size of the cube fuse. You don't need a reducer anymore. So like this is a 15 amp fuse and this is a 100 amp fuse block or CCP. The 15 amp will still fit in the 100 amp holder, so you won't need a fuse reducer to go down in size, but they are size rejecting so that if you have a 20 amp CCP, you can't put a 30 amp or higher fuse inside of it, actually 25 amp or higher, because of the way that it's size rejecting on the blades or on the stabs, the blades of the fuse, the cube fuse itself.
The cube fuse itself, we size the actual electrical components in there to make sure they don't fit into the wrong base. So if we've got a 15 amp base, you can only put up to a 15 amp fuse. On a 20 amp base, up to a 20 amp fuse. So you can always fuse down, but you could never go higher than what the base is rated for.
You can see, like, obviously, it's pretty obvious on a 30 to 100, it won't fit at all.
Right. So you can always fuse down. So that's a nice thing. And it's important to know, too, when you're using these for UPS applications and maybe some other applications, we can buy a 15 amp base and you can put a 6 amp fuse or a 10 amp fuse in there. And the reason for that is sometimes if you have UPS or other applications, you may want to size for the load, not necessarily for the branch. So if you have UPS systems that are critical and you want to really protect the device itself, you can put a 6 amp fuse or a 10 amp fuse or some other size rather than just slapping on a 15 amp, circuit breaker, which you'd have to do in the past. We can now actually protect the true rating of the load that you have. So,
okay. So the target customer and applications, obviously we've been using these in a lot of construction projects in the area. I know I've gotten a lot of them, and so has Matt, in educational facilities mainly. We've done a lot of education, like schools. They're going up into universities like Rowan College, Brookdale Community College is looking at them. I know we've done a couple of jobs at Rutgers that have had a couple of these panels in it as well. So obviously education facilities, healthcare facilities. I know all the dialysis places going up in the past year and a half or so with DaVita and FMC. We've got a lot of those facilities that are using the fusible panel board because it's easier to selectively coordinate. I know we also had a Amboy medical facility that was spec'd in as a fusible system. They put in a circuit breaker job, and then they had to remove all the equipment and put in a bunch of these quick spec coordination panel boards. And the thing was, it was one of those jobs where we had to use the expedited fee to get some of those panels in on time that they needed to have before in order to get some of the building operational. So it was one of those jobs where we used the expedited fee to get some of those panels made in, I think it was like 8 days. It was less than the 10 days that we promised, but it wasn't we need it right away kind of thing that they wanted.
Anytime you're quoting a job and you see generators with automatic transfer switches, there's a good opportunity to look at those and say maybe that's a critical system, and that they could use a fusible system like this. So that's primarily where we see it. So when you're bidding a job, please take notice if there are Bussman panel boards on there, because sometimes it's not very evident when you're first looking at them that they're Bussman quick spec panel boards, and it's important because they're a little higher in price than a regular circuit breaker panel board. But the reason for that is we don't certainly build as many as they do in the breaker world. But now you don't have to do a coordination study when you utilize our products, and that's why a lot of engineers specify them, because now they know if they keep that 2-to-1 ratio that John talked about, we can have a coordinated system. We can do it very easily. So when you're looking at your jobs, like I said, if you got generators and automatic transfer switches, panel boards down on the load side of those things, just be aware that there could be a job that if we're not on the job, please contact us. We'll have an opportunity, or if we are on a job, just be aware of it and make sure you take into consideration and come to us for quotes on those things.
All right. And we're seeing a lot of these jobs pop up now where they're already specified in, and makes it a lot easier for us, instead of having to hunt down, figure out, which engineers we need to see to get them specified. And we are doing that. We do have a new gentleman named
Ed Miller.
Ed Miller. I was thinking Mike Miller. I knew that was wrong. Ed Miller is our field applications engineer. He's going to be working in the territory New York City and New Jersey. I don't know, is he going to go into Philadelphia?
Not in Philadelphia, but North Jersey and New York.
All right. So he's mainly going to be working for me and Anthony then. And he's going to be specifying this product along with some of the surge products that we offer, and also, of course, the power module, elevator shunt trip disconnect switch. But he is going to be responsible for making all the contact with all the engineers and getting the product specified and under all the different codes that we help fulfill the needs for. Like if you look at it, in 2005 NEC, there's essential system emergency systems under 700.27, where selective coordination is required. Same thing with legally required standby systems. We see this a lot in a lot of the drawings. When we look under the specs, it says, this part of the electrical distribution system must be selectively coordinated, and it'll state 701.18 or because it's a legally required standby system.
And we could use your help with that as well. So if you have design build contractors out there that we don't know about or we don't get to, or even engineers you guys have some relationships with, please let us know. We'd love to go in and see them, and certainly if we can specify this, we can certainly point in your direction when the time comes to go buy this thing.
Yeah, and if you know, like 708, the critical operation power systems, that came about in 2008, and that actually added a lot to this. Because if you look at the educational facilities that we're talking about, where we're getting this thing, where the panels have been spec'd in, it's because it's going to be a place of gathering, or it's going to be a destination for people during an emergency. And you want to make sure that you have consistent power to these facilities that are going to be required as places of gathering and stuff like that. So you want to make sure that they are selectively coordinated, and obviously this panel makes it a lot easier to do so. I guess they're going to, also in 2014, there was a critical operations data systems for the data system people to make sure that not just facilities, but also, facilities for people, but also for data, so that is selectively coordinated, so there's no power loss in data systems, so that there's no, so that everything can be recorded.
When you have financial institutions like banks, credit card companies, those types of things, insurance companies, they're going to make that data has to be continually operating, so you can't lose any of that. So they want to make sure that besides having their UPS systems and backup systems, they want to make sure that that's all coordinated as well. So if they have any kind of fault, they don't lose those server racks, or they're limited to what they would lose. So it is part of 2014 code. So just be aware of that, especially in the New York market, where there's a lot of financial institutions. You want to make sure that they're aware that has to be done if they're following 2014 code.
If you look at some of the jobs that we've been looking at, like there's a Microsoft job in New York City that's looking at selective coordination. One of their solutions is to use a fusible panel board. So it's not just like the healthcare institutions and the educational facilities. It's also data systems and processing facilities like that. And you're also going to look at some of the pharmaceutical companies. They're going to look at selective coordination to make sure the continual processes don't get slowed down because of an unnecessary blackout, because they didn't have selective coordination. So like the Bristol Myers Squibbs of the world and other facilities around this area, especially that are pharmaceuticals, if they have any questions, we can always, be brought in and talk to them about how selective coordination is going to help their uptime, because that's really what we're going to do with these fusible panels. And also,
I'm sorry. The other thing was when we talk about critical processes, I've sold these in applications where they have to do data acquisition for the EPA and that kind of a thing. So I have an OEM that bought a few of these over the years because they'll do data acquisition for emissions monitoring. Because if you're spewing gas, into the environment, the EPA wants to know that you're doing it properly, So they got to make sure all that power is up. So we put these on systems where they are monitoring that to make sure that, hey, if we do get some kind of a fault, we're not going to take the whole system down. So you got to think outside the box a little bit as well. So, when you're talking about, hey, how critical are your applications, that's a good opportunity to sell a coordinated system. So.
Right. And with coordination, obviously, we do have a couple of petrochem facilities in our territory. So we want to make sure that they're aware that this is available as well. I know that we've been working with our counterparts at Crouse-Hinds to make sure that we can get a explosion-proof version of the panel board. I don't know if it's a part number yet, but I know we can get to an explosion-proof panel board.
We can build explosion-proof panel boards. We've done it in the last few years, partnering with Crouse-Hinds.
Right. So we know it's available. I know we've used it in Houston and some of the other oil refinery locations in the country. So if you look at it competitively against some of the traditional fuse manufacturers like Faraz or Mersen and Little Fuse, their offering is a much wider base, like I said before. And one of the limitations is that they use CCPs and most of their Class CC fuses in most of their individual circuits. So it limits you to 30 amps, where our Q fuse goes up to 100 amp per circuit. So we can have anywhere from 1 to 100 amps, and they're pretty much limited to 1 to 30 amps. And in their circuits, they do have larger available, but if you look at it, the design of the panel board, you're going to have circuits larger than 30 in a different location. So that, it doesn't.
It's not as elegant.
It doesn't look as pleasing to the eye. Not that that matters, but.
And they utilize, typically they use circuit breaker technology along with fuse technology. The circuit breakers are there to turn it on and off and do that disconnecting means. Whereas ours is an integrated design that was designed from the ground up at Bussman. We set the stage for this, and we knew we had to come out with something to help meet code after the 2005 regulations. So we put a lot of thought into it, where theirs is more of an afterthought. They saw how popular ours was, how good of a product it is, and they basically tried coming out with a product that was not as elegant, not as easy to use. And as John alluded to, when you use a Class CC fuse, all those fuses are the same size. So 1 to 30 amp is the same size. So the issue with that is you could potentially put a 30 amp fuse in where a 20 amp was meant for. In our design with our holders, if I've got a 20 amp holder, I can't put in a 30 amp fuse. I can only put up to a 20 amp in there. So the nice thing is ours are truly keyed. So when you buy the right holder, you can only put in the right fuse in that application. Whereas in other applications, you could potentially size for the wrong fuse.
Absolutely. And with their applications, there's actually there's the switch that you have to turn off the power to, and then there's the fuse holder, and you could technically open it live, I think, right, on theirs? If but they do have a way around. But ours are much safer because you can't pull the fuse out at all while it's live, and in theirs you could open the fuse holder while it's live if you don't turn the switch off, because it's not an integrated system, or it's not a one-piece system like ours is. Also, when you compare it to some of the other things that they have, their SCCR, or their interrupting rating for the panel, is going to be maxed out at 100. Ours has a maximum of 200 KA. Our panel is rated up to 600 volts. Theirs is only rated up to 480. And we also have I don't know if their main are fusible, or if they're only main lug only. I'm not sure. I think they do have a fusible main switch available, but I think it's much bigger than 59 inches high. It's quite a sizable panel when they do have the disconnect on there. So ours is a much more compact design if you look at it with a fusible disconnect. And that's just the height. The width is always going to be much skinnier as well. And if you look at compared to some of our circuit breaker competition with the circuit breaker panel boards, it's just a matter of selective coordination. The sizes are pretty much the same. We designed our fusible panel to be the same size as what you're normally used to for a circuit breaker panel. So the size is pretty much the same. the number of circuits, we only go up to 42, whereas some of the circuit breaker panels do go up a lot higher, but they won't have that type of interrupting rating or that SECR with that number of circuits.
The thing you have to do with the circuit breakers as well, it's a more complicated system to make a coordinated system. So you have to calculate the fault current, you have to take all those fault currents, you have to plot them on time current curves, you have to make sure that they're going to coordinate, they're going to open up the way you want them to open up. So it's a lot more difficult to do that, and that's why when we simplified it with our fusible system, a lot of engineers love it because it's easy math. They look upstream and they say, the one upstream is twice as big as the one here, so I'm going to have a coordinated system. So it's very easy to come up with a coordinated system with a fusible solution.
And if you look at some of the fusible options from the traditional breaker houses like GE, Square D, or Eaton, if you look at their fusible options, they can sometimes be wider depending on what type of fuses and what amp rating all the circuits are at. And they certainly don't have like a fusible design like ours that would have 42 circuits in it. It's just not what they designed and not what they built. So our solution is a lot more flexible than those solutions. You can use it for many more circuits. It's much smaller, and it's even cost effective, I think, in some certain situations.
Sure.
All right. And so some of the advantages of our fusible panel, besides just the size, is also the safety. We can interlock the switches, interlock with the fuses. You can also have a padlock on the fuse, on the switch itself, so you can lock it in the off position. So if somebody's got to do like a lockout tagout situation, you can just lock it out at the switch. Obviously, we also have the doors that can be locked and keyed however you want it. I know for a bunch of the panels in New York City, we had to have them keyed a certain way, and we were able to get that done. So those are the main comparative points that make our fusible system a little bit better in especially selective coordination issues and wherever else you might need a fusible panel. So some of the questions that we've been asked is the availability of cube fuses. I know Cooper, you guys do stock the cube fuses, especially in the more popular amp ratings like 20, 30, 15, 60, 50, 40. So we do have quick ship and emergency shipment available for you guys if you need it and you don't stock it or you're out of stock here, especially at the CDC. So one of the other things that is often brought up is that the customer needs a fast-acting fuse. So if you look at, like the UPS systems and the data system protection that Matt was talking about, you're going to need a fast-acting fuse, and you don't want to wait for a time delay fuse to open. So we do have time delay and fast-acting fuses available in the cube fuse. So it makes it a much easier, or it's much more effective at protecting the data systems. And then the time delay fuses will allow you to protect your general branch circuits much better.
And for those of you guys who don't know, the cube fuse is nothing new. It's been out for almost 20 years in a marketplace, so there are a lot of people who have not seen it. If you look at the bottom right there, it says a Class CF Bussman cube fuse provides Class J electrical protection. It's the same electrical characteristics as a Class J. Now it is what we call a Class CF. UL did designate it a Class CF, but electrically it's the same. Mechanically, it's just a square body or a cube body instead of being a round cylindrical. But when you're looking at it, the characteristics are the same as our Class J, like our LPJ series fuse.
All right. So I mean, it operates the same way as a Class J time delay fuse or a Class J fast-acting fuse, depending on if you get the fast-acting or not. And one of the things is it is a finger-safe fuse, so you can't touch it, but there are points on the fuse itself where you can check for continuity and other live tests that you might have to perform on the fuse or the circuit. So it is finger-safe. The design of the switch is also finger-safe, so it doesn't require any tools to remove the fuse. Sometimes it takes a little bit of effort, especially when the switch is new, but like this one has been a sample for a while, so it's pretty easy to pull out. All right. So we do have a lot of supporting literature if you need it. If you were going to see a contractor and discuss a job and they have any questions about it, obviously you can contact one of us, or you can ask us for any of the literature if you want. It should also be available online for you to download on our normal website. We have the data sheet for the panel board. We also have a data sheet for the CCP, the disconnect. We also have data sheets for the fuse, whether it be time delay or fast acting. We also have sales training presentation. Anytime you want us to come out and give a presentation to a contractor or an end user or an engineer or a specifying person, we're more than happy to discuss this or give them a presentation on anything. If you have any questions about the Quick Quote Configurator, we'll be more than happy to help you out on it. I know Matt and I use it once in a while. Not once in a while, all the time.
Pretty frequently, yep.
And we can go through any questions that you have about setting up a panel or specifying, putting it into the configurator and getting the results that you need. We don't price those for you online. You do still have to come to us for the prices, but if you build it, we can get it priced really quickly. So that's one of the advantages. Plus, it's done the way you wanted it to be done.
Correct.
If you have any questions about where it's been used, Matt and I have sold a bunch of these at different projects, different types of projects as well. So it's not just, I only have experience in healthcare or education. We've sold these in a lot of different arenas. You sold them?
But arenas are a very hot place for selective coordination because obviously if you've got, the people in that building have to get out if there is an issue. So if you look at the arena in Allentown, that has all of our panel boards in it. The Penguins Arena in Pittsburgh has our panels in it. So there's a lot of arenas around the country that have this that have them in there. So they're very popular for that kind of a thing as well. So from healthcare to arenas to industrial, the panels are used everywhere. So don't just think commercial. There's a lot of other opportunities for these as well.
All right. And if you look at it, we even have some of these in mixed-use buildings as well. I know there's a couple of places in Jersey City that have a higher interrupting rating. So the fusible panel was a better option. So that's the fusible panel. We also are going to be discussing the switch that we use inside the panel, or the compact circuit protector base, which is this module right here. We do sell these individually, so it's not just available in the panel board. We do have them for DIN rail mount, which this model is DIN rail mountable CCP, and this is also the panel board mounted one with the stabs on it. So it uses the finger safe Class CF fuses, which have the Class J performance. They are fully rated to 600 volts. If you look at it, we do have 125 volt DC rating on them. Some of the OEMs in the territory that we share have used the CCP because of its DC characteristics for 100 volt DC applications. If you look at it, it does have a 200 kA SCCR on the whole assembly with using the cube fuse. We do have it in 1, 2, and 3 pole versions. It is a UL98 listed disconnect. And like I said before, those bolt mounted design into the bus system, and it does comply with CUL US and to CSA standards. If you look at it, like I said before, it's IP20 finger safe with 10 gauge wire. We have multiple fuse options, whether you want it fast acting or time delay. We also have the cube fuse for like solar applications and wind energy applications where the speed's going to be slightly different, or if you look at the photovoltaic stuff, the voltage is going to be a little bit different as well.
Correct.
So we do have the cube fuse for
specific applications.
Yeah, specific applications besides just the UPS and the general circuits that we were talking about before. Like you said before, it is fuse rejecting. It has fuse rejecting size, so you can't put in a 30 amp where you have a 20 amp, which is a big change because if you look at the Class CC fuse, which is basically what this is replacing. If you look at the compact Class CC fusible disconnect. This is a much smaller version, and it is also able to size reject a little more selectively than the Class CC fuse. So you have not just from 1 to 30, but you have 1 to 15, and then up to 20, up to 30. So it's more options available for size rejection. Like I said before, it's a lockout tagout with a 4mm shank padlockable, and it's also a pin system. So if you need all three branches on a three-phase system, all three legs of that switch would be locked as well. All right. So we also have two different versions of every single cube. I don't know. I know the fast-acting and the time delay cube fuses both have indicating windows in them. I'm not sure about the photovoltaic.
I'm not sure either.
I believe that one is non-indicating only.
Correct.
But we do have AC DC voltages on all of our fuses. Like all fuses, we have voltage rating labeled on it, as well as the interrupting rating and the amp rating.
99% of the time we sell these for commercial applications. That fuse on the screen is exactly what you see. There's not indication on the fuse itself. We can get it on the fuse itself, but there's a little dot halfway down that switch that will light up if the fuse does blow. So we give you blown fuse LED on the switch. The only time I've ever used indication on the fuse is on low voltage DC applications, because we do need about 90 volts going through the system to light up the LED that's on the switch itself. But I've used these on 24 volt panels at like Verizon and emergency systems. We're using 24 volts. So we put the indication on the fuse to make sure that they know that the fuse is blown. So 99% of the time we don't put it on the fuse just to keep the price down. But if the customer wants indicating fuses, that's just an option on that quick quote configuration tool, and we can get that for you.
So easily turned on. Right. So like we said before, some of the major advantages of this CCP, or the compact circuit protector, is it's finger safe. The switch interlock, you can't pull fuses out without breaking the switch. When it's on or when it's under load, we have an ampacity rejecting base for the fuse, so you can't put in a higher amp rating than is specified or that was determined when the switch was installed. We have open fuse indication, both whether it's on the fuse or on the switch. So you have two different types of indication available. And that's basically because you still do have to test all the fuses before you pull them out and replace them. You want to make sure that the fuse doesn't have any continuity on it when you're replacing it. So we have bus mounting. So the bolt-mounted design allows quick installation for our quick-spec panel board. Also, some of the other frames that you could use that on would be available from like Eaton. And, so that's that. And also, we have DIN rail mounted versions for that CCP base as well.
Very common to use the DIN rail mount versions in front of variable frequency drives and those types of things in the marketplace. So you can have an internal disconnect switch, maybe feed a motor or feed some other type of device. So the DIN rail mount version gives you UL98 disconnect inside a panel, so you can isolate heating circuits, motor circuits, that kind of a thing.
Absolutely. Okay. So market applications, anywhere you see the QSCP being used, you can use the CCP. The size is a big factor in getting it specified in some of the OEMs that we have around here, because the size is much smaller than like our normal like FRS R30. It's a much more compact design. So like if you look at just the difference between like an FRS R30 in length and especially once you put it into a switch, it's a much smaller, more compact design, so we can use it in a lot of different enclosures that are smaller now. Like everybody wants to save space. If you look at anything, whether it's a construction job where they want to have smaller electrical closets, or they just want to have smaller enclosures because real estate's getting more expensive. So anytime you have any space, engineers and architects are pressured to have less space for the electrical equipment. So
Right.
the smaller design and smaller footprint gives us a big advantage over some of the traditional products that we've been offering. And like Matt said, the Cube Fuse has been on the market for more than 20 years. It's been proven to work just as effectively as all the other fuses, which is tremendously well. The Class J has been around for, I think, since the late 40s, early 50s. So that type of protection has been around for a long time, and it's been proven. And we have all these different applications where it can be used because it's just a smaller footprint, and it's got all these other safety advantages that go along with it because it's finger safe and because it's size rejected. And some of the QSCP applications that we were talking about before, obviously it applies here as well. So these are pretty much the same customer reactions as the QSCP or the panel board. So like I said before, you guys stock a lot of different amp ratings in the Cube Fuse. I think most of them are time delay though. I don't know if they stock any. You guys stock any fast-acting fuses. And like we said before, the CF fuse is Class J, whether it's time delay or fast-acting. It does provide the same electrical characteristics either way. And the CCPB does have rejection breaks for ampacity at 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 90, and 100. So basically, they're size rejecting for where we normally would have for the majority of the fuse amp ratings that you're going to be seeing.
And that's commonplace in the circuit breaker world as well.
Right.
So that's part of the reason we did it as well.
Yeah. So obviously, 15, 20, and 30 being for wire size. Anything under that would just be because of what the load is requiring. So if you look at it, we do have 1, 2, and 3 pole available in all those different amp ratings, amp size. And we also have horsepower ratings for all those. If you need to see the chart, obviously you can ask one of us. I believe is the presentation going to be available, or is it just the video? Okay. So if you do need the presentation, we give you all that stuff as well if you contact us. But obviously the video is going to be available for you to look at again. Same thing, we have all the selling tools available. You can either go to the website, you can contact one of your representatives. We'll be more than happy to provide you with required literature. We do have 3D models available, whether it's CAD or not, for use. I know we had a couple of OEMs that required the CAD drawing so that they could put it into their designs. We have no problem doing that. It's really quick. We do it all the time. So that's it. It's our compact circuit protector with a Cube Fuse base. I guess that's it for the presentation. Does anybody have any questions? I guess that's not a question then. All right. Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate the opportunity, and we look forward to fielding any questions you may have about it.
Thank you.
Thanks.